Hi, this is Bill, and you are on Finest Travel Beat with Angela and Bill. Angela and I recently traveled to London, England, to embark on a 12-night British Isles cruise on the Regal Princess. In this series, we're going to do something a little bit differently. We're going to take you around the various ports and also our stay before and after the cruise in London. We'll show you around the city a little bit. We'll show you around the different ports and the areas. And as we do so, we're going to kind of give you some tips, some hints, some ideas, some thoughts on what we did, what other options there are, and the things that we think you need to know if you're going to do a similar type of cruise or hit similar ports. Again, thank you for watching. We really hope you enjoy these videos. We learned so much on our recent trip to cities such as London, Cork, Belfast, Edinburgh, Dublin, and even a stop in Paris, France. And we're going to do a short video of each one of those cities or each one of those ports to let you know what's going on. Now, we started our day on Friday. We did a red-eye flight overnight from Orlando International Airport to London's Gatwick Airport. We flew out of Orlando Airport's brand new Terminal C. What I will tell you about this is definitely get to the airport early. We got there well over 3 hours ahead of time and had an issue with parking. Now, we had to park quite a distance away and take a bus, and it worked out okay. But if that parking lot had been full, we may have had a real issue and had to try to find off-site parking, which we weren't prepared for. Now, if you look out the window there, that little dark on the horizon, if you're Floridian, you know that means bad weather's coming in, and it did. This was our takeoff in pretty bad storms. A great job. We took British Airways. The pilot was able to take off without an issue. And believe it or not, they say that London and the British Isles always rains. This was the extent of our rain. I mean, we brought all kinds of rain gear, raincoats, we waterproofed everything, we sprayed sneakers, we tried them out in the wet, and during our little over 2-week trip, it rained probably about 5 minutes the whole time. We had very, very unusual weather, and I'll explain that through the rest of this video and the video series. Just to give you some quick background and some perspective, we flew in red-eye overnight Friday night. We landed Saturday morning at London's Gatwick Airport. Again, that's about an hour and a half south of London. And we stayed in London on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Tuesday, we took the shuttle to Southampton Cruise Port. We did a 12-day cruise, came back to London for 1 day, and then left the Monday afterwards. And again, as the video series goes through, I'll explain all the details behind all that. The landing in Gatwick Airport was smooth, as was the flight. It was code share. We booked through American Airlines. It was a British Airways operated flight, and the flight was fantastic. The crew was great. The food actually was pretty decent on it as well for airplane food. We landed at Gatwick Airport about 10:30. It was a little bit delayed because of the weather in Orlando. We booked private transfers through Project Expedition, who I use for many of my clients. They're very reliable. As soon as we cleared customs, there was a gentleman there waiting with our name on a sign. And yes, there are McDonald's in Britain as soon as you get out of the airport. But the pickup was very smooth, no problem. He helped us to the car, and we got in for our trip to London. We had probably more luggage than we needed to, so I actually sat in the front seat with the driver on the left side, which normally there would be a steering wheel, but being London and England, they drive on the left side of the road and the steering wheel is on the right. Just for your information, if you're in a car in England, there is no brakes on the left side when you're sitting in what would normally be the driver's seat. And also being on a highway definitely took me a couple minutes to get used to. It was very interesting after a red-eye flight. The transfers took us to our hotel where we checked in and dropped the luggage off. We got started right away because we had purchased tickets in advance to the Tower of London. We took the tube from the Sheraton Park Lane near Buckingham Palace. I'll explain that to you a little bit later on in this series, the hotels we stayed at. Well, we hit the ground running as we had time tickets for the Tower of London. As you can see, we're walking now over London Bridge, which is different than Tower Bridge, which you can see in the background there, and you'll see a little later in the video. I'll also explain to you a little bit about the tube and whether you need Oyster cards. But right here is the monument to the Great London Fire of 1666. Now, this monument was designed by Sir Christopher Wren and was built in the 1670s. Christopher Wren designed many of the abbeys and churches throughout London after the Great Fire. Now, while we didn't, you can climb this 202-foot tower. It has a spiral staircase inside and an observation platform near the top. It's probably about a 20-minute walk to the Tower of London. As you can see, you really have to kind of pay attention when crossing the street. They actually have signs all over the place to tell you which way to look, because not only in the United States, but in the rest of Europe, most cars drive on the right side of the road. Here we're looking at the Thames River. Right there is the HMS Belfast, which is one of the warships. You can actually visit that as well. One thing I will tell you is that London is very spread out. It is much bigger than it appears on maps. Things are not as close as they appear. We'll explain more of that as the video goes on. Now here's our first look at the Tower of London. The Tower of London was started in 1066. The history of it I'll allow you to look up on the internet, but I'll give you some information on it in general. First of all, make sure you book your tickets in advance. It'll save you time and avoid disappointment should it be sold out. That's going to be a recurring theme through this video series, and you will see there is a hiccup later on where we did not get to go to one of the places we were looking to go to because it was sold out. The Tower of London houses things such as the Crown Jewels. It was used as a prison at different times. It's so much very interesting history here. We spent about 2.5, 3 hours here, I guess, and that's the amount of time they say you should spend there. Quite frankly, we probably could have spent 6 or 7 hours there exploring all the different buildings and reading all the signage and stuff. If you're a student of history, London is just absolutely phenomenal, like nothing I've ever seen in the United States. Just so much history, so many things are old, and that again is also going to be a recurring theme. So the amount of time you spend here is going to kind of be a little open-ended, so I wouldn't schedule too much stuff after the Tower of London. Again, we spent about 3 hours here. Probably could have spent more, but we were a little tired from being up basically all night. That's the famous Traders Gate. They would use that to bring prisoners up the Thames to the Tower of London. We were lucky enough to get a close-up view of the ravens at the Tower of London. These are very famous ravens, and they are here all the time. There's some superstition involved with ravens leaving the Tower of London, and I'll leave that as something for you to either look up or find out when you travel there. These are guards that are guarding the Crown Jewels. The Crown Jewels I could not film inside, but they were fascinating and breathtaking, to say the least. These guards are actual members of active military service in Great Britain. One thing that is an absolute must is taking the Yeoman Water Tour. Now, the Yeoman Water Tour is included with your admission. It takes place about every half hour and lasts about an hour. The gentleman here was very funny, very informative, very interesting. These are all members of former members of the British military. They have to go through quite rigorous checks to become one of these, and they actually live with their families on the grounds. If you take this tour, they'll explain all that to you. Again, I'm trying not to do too many spoiler alerts in here, but let me just say it was just absolutely amazing. The history you learned, it was kind of very mind-blowing, and it was one of the most enjoyable things we did on our trip, certainly in London. Without giving away too much, I'm just going to play a little clip of one of the parts of his speech and his presentation.
You're now standing in the outer ward of the Tower of London. That's to say between the inner and outer Belgium or defensive wall. The inner wall is 50 feet high and the outer wall behind you is 28 feet thick. Behind you to my left then is Mint Street. So named because up to the year 1810 all the coins of the realm were designed and produced here. So these buildings that house the mint, as it says up there, are called casemates, or houses within a wall. They're now the accommodation for yeoman warders like myself, so I just live down that street there.
If you're a student of history in any way, shape, or form, you could easily spend 5 to 6 hours here. The crown jewels are amazing. Again, just so much to see, so much military relics as well. Everywhere you went to in London, which is absolutely fascinating. After visiting the Tower of London, we grabbed a little bit of lunch and a pint or two at one of the local pubs. Trust me, there'll be plenty more pub footage as we go through this series. After lunch, we decided to get tickets to the hop-on, hop-off bus. There are several options for this. The one we picked was city sightseeing tours for this, and it actually included a boat ride on the Thames, which you'll see later on in the series. The hop-on, hop-off bus is a great value for getting around and also getting some narration on what you're seeing. Going back to other options for travel is the Underground. Now, you no longer need an Oyster card for the Underground. Just use your credit card to tap in and tap out. But do be advised that everybody has to have their own credit card. You can't tap in or tap out two people. And there it is, our first view of the Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben. Breathtakingly beautiful, and as you see through the series, there's just so many things that we saw that were iconic sites that we've all read or seen or heard about, and seeing them in person was just indescribable. At this point, we decided to hop off, walk around Westminster area a little bit, and walked up Whitehall Street to see some of the government buildings and walk past things like 10 Downing Street. Here is the Horse Guards Parade. This is actually the official entrance to Buckingham Palace and to St. James Palace. We got here a little late, so we were unable to see the museum. It was closing as we got there. Again, a very long day. So we took a little walk around inside and just kind of enjoyed the older buildings, and it just a phenomenal day. We did the long walk up Whitehall Street. Unfortunately, we could not get down the road for number 10 Downing Street, which is where the Prime Minister lives and his offices are. This is Trafalgar Square, and we walked from Trafalgar Square also up to Covent Garden. Now, Covent Garden is kind of like, it would remind me of somewhat of South Street Seaport or a Faneuil Hall in Boston, if you've ever been to those. It's kind of a large open-air area with different shops and restaurants and plenty going on, tons going on in the area. We do have more footage of Trafalgar Square and of Covent Garden and the environs in the next couple of videos that you'll see. For the rest of the day, we walked around, and I mean walked a lot. We walked on this day probably 8 or 9 miles, so make sure you have comfortable shoes, comfortable clothing as well. It was very warm when we were there. It was in the 80s, believe it or not, which is very, very unusual for London, especially in September. I'm probably going to do a video of this series once every few days, depending on what the reception I get. If people enjoy these videos, I'll do more of them. I'm going to try to keep them all to under about 15 minutes or so if possible. I know your time is valuable, but there's a lot of information to get out there. So if you're enjoying this video, definitely hit that like button. Please subscribe. Add in the comments below whether you want to see more of them. Believe it or not, we ended up eating dinner at a Polish restaurant near the Waterloo train station, which was absolutely fantastic. The food in London surprised. We enjoyed it. I don't think we had a bad meal while we were there. Other first thoughts of London is it's very clean, at least in the central London areas, the tourist areas, and even by the public transportation areas. It was immaculately clean. We felt very safe. One of the safest cities I visited, and this is coming from somebody that's a retired New York City cop. I felt safer in London than I do in New York City by far. Be prepared to walk. Don't be afraid of the tube. The London Underground is very safe. It's very far below ground, so there's a lot of large stations. It was actually used as a bomb shelter during the Blitz. So much history there as well. So again, don't be afraid to take that. Read the maps. People are very friendly. They will help you out if you can't find where you're going. Now, this is the front seat of the top of the Hop On Hop Off bus. This is Tower Bridge, not to be mistaken with London Bridge. London Bridge was that first bridge, kind of boring. Tower Bridge is a really cool one. You can actually go up into Tower Bridge. Tickets are required. Again, I highly recommend buying tickets in advance. As you come over, you can see on the left again is the Tower of London. Over the next couple of days, we visited Westminster Abbey, the National Gallery, the British Museum, Buckingham Palace. We saw the changing of the guard. We have so much information, so much to show you. But again, we're going to try to keep all these videos to certainly under 20 minutes, hopefully 15 minutes. But again, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like. Please share it with your friends. It's a little time consuming to do. So if we get the good feedback that you're enjoying this, great. We'll continue doing them. We'll do more of these on our future travels. Well, on behalf of Angela, that wraps day one. Thank you for joining us. And please come join us on our next adventure. Bye-bye, everybody.